I'm Eric, and this is Yeti Garage. I'm working on my Bel Air today. I'm in the process of putting a Ford 9-inch under it. In a previous video, I showed that I cut the brackets off the factory housing. I welded them onto this 9-inch. So I'm going to use the factory suspension to put this 9-inch under it. Today, I'm going to work on narrowing the housing to make it the width I want. So I'm going to cut here, weld a new end on. You could reuse these ends if you're staying with the same style end. This is the big Ford or Torino end. But I'm putting the GM style end on it. I bought these, I think these are from Mosier. This is the GM bowl pattern. I'm going to have some GM disc brakes I'm going to use. Either if you're buying a new end or you're reusing the old end, you still need an alignment tool. Alignment tools, you find them for $400, up to like $800 depending on how many pieces it has to it. The cheaper way to do it is just buy a piece of shaft. I got this from Granger. You can get them from any industrial supplier. This is 1.25" shaft. It's just a standard, they call it like a soft shaft. It's not hardened, it doesn't have a keyway in it. Paid like $100 for that. And I bought a piece of aluminum. This piece of aluminum was like $30. And I'm gonna use my lathe to cut bushings off of this piece of aluminum. If you don't have a lathe, you can buy just the bushings for $150 for the 4 bushings. There's different guys on eBay selling them for whatever rear end you're doing. They make them for a Dana 60, Corporate 14, or a Ford 9-inch like I'm doing. So the bushings, the shaft, and then you need a center section. Now you could use your center section you're going to use in the car, but I'm lucky that I have the original center section, and I've already bought a new center section with a True Track and the gears I want in it. So I can just keep this center section as my alignment tool. So I need to strip this down. All I need is the center casting piece and these bearing caps. I don't need the gears or the pinion or any of the bearings. I'm going to replace these bearings with bushings that I'm going to make. The first step is to strip this housing down. So that's the piece I need, the main casting for the center section, and the bearing caps. So I measured, that's the race from the center support bearings. It measures 2 7/8 OD. And then I'm going to make a bushing that's 2 7/8 OD, 1.25" ID. Make 2 of those, and then I'm going to make 2 that are, these measure, the bearings right here are 3 1/8 OD. So I'll make 2 bushings that are 3 1/8 OD, 1.25" ID. So get on the lathe, start doing that. Also soak this center section in some degreaser. Probably paint this thing since I'm gonna keep it around the shop to use in the future maybe. It's pretty gross. This is my South Bend lathe. If you went to school for machining or you work as a machinist, you probably want to stop the video because I'm by no means a professional. I'm probably going to drive you crazy with all the mistakes I'm making, but I'm going to start off. I have a biggest bit I could find laying around was a 7/8, so I'm going to drill out the center to 7/8, and I have a small boring bar. I'll take it up to 1.25 inches, and then I'll do the OD to size. I'll probably start with the 3 1/8. This is 3 1/4 shaft or stock. Take it down to 3 1/8 and cut it off, and then cut 2 of those, and then go down to 2 7/8 and cut those off, 2 of those. And I think I got enough material to do that. So bear with me. Definitely an amateur when it comes to running this lathe. Okay, I'm done using the lathe. Built 2 of these. These fit in the housing ends and on the shaft. And I built 2 of these. These fit on the shaft, and then they bolt into this center section. Bearing cap holds it in. So next, I have this marked already, but I'm gonna triple check my math, make sure cutting it in the right spot, and then I'm gonna cut these ends off and square, make sure the cuts square to the center line of the tube. And then I'll show you putting the center section in, putting the shaft through the middle and the bushings on the end, and getting ready to get a tack on the housing ends. Clean the inside of the tube first. Mainly I'm trying to get all the oil and grease out of there so it doesn't mess with my weld. I put a little bevel on the end of the tube, so a place for my weld to go. And then take it all the way to like a full pin weld. I left a little bit of land on there. I think it'll be easier to line up. Then I got the original center section out of this rear end all cleaned up. Well, kind of cleaned up, clean enough. Bolted these bushings in, and then the shaft still spins, so that's a good sign. So that's how that'll work inside the housing. That shaft goes through those two bushings, and then that is the center line of the housing. So you can put these other bushings on the end, and it'll align the new housing ends. And I was going to show, those are the old ends, which earlier I said were big forward, but after I looked at them, I realized this is the small forward end. See how it's round with one flat side. That's a small forward. The big forward would be flat on this side also. Plus when they're saying small forward or big forward, it's the size of the bearing. This is a smaller bearing. This won't fit in there. It fits in these. Doesn't affect me much. All I need out of this is the housing. I ordered new shafts, some cut to length shafts. And then this shows the difference from the two cuts is how much I offset that rear end to get that pinion centered. And then this shows how much I cut. That's how much I'm narrowing it on that side and then this side. Overall, it's about 4 inches narrower than when it started. So I'm ready to pull the shaft out of this center section and bolt the center section into the housing, and then reassemble everything and get the TIG welder out. Put a first pass in here with the TIG. Okay, I have the alignment jig all bolted in. I put a gasket in between this carrier and the housing. I don't know if that really matters. I mean, it's such a small amount, but I thought better safe than sorry. And I come down here to the end, and it's pretty far off. So the OD of this new end is smaller than the OD of the tube. I didn't measure them, but it's a little bit smaller, which makes this look like it's off more than it is, but it is definitely 1/8 of an inch. The tube is pulled towards what would be the back of the vehicle. So it needs to bend towards the front. The other end's about the exact same way. So I've never bent an axle tube before. I'm thinking if I heat right next to this weld and quench it, that I might be able to move it that small amount. So I'm gonna give it a shot. ended up heating and quenching twice to get this aligned. Now I've got this end tacked on, and the shaft spins nice and free, so it's all aligned on this end. This other end, I have the end tacked on. I wanted to show how far off this is. So right now with the bushing out, and we slide the bushing in, you can see that there's an 1/8 of an inch gap. So I'm gonna have to heat and quench this tube on the other side here. And then I'll show once I get it lined up, and then make sure the shaft still spins, I think is the key to it being aligned. So I had to heat and quench this in twice also, but you can see pretty aligned, and it spins freely in there. Now it's time to weld those ends on, and then I'm sure it'll be all crooked from the heat. And I'll have to maybe have to heat and quench it again to get it all freed up. But time to weld. So I put a single pass on each end with the TIG welder, and right when I finished I couldn't hardly get this shaft to spin, and I thought maybe it had pulled that much, but now that it's cooling down, it's starting to spin. I think the aluminum bushings soaked up that heat and expanded enough to grab this shaft, because now it's spinning real easy again. So it's still aligned. I'm going to pull this shaft out so I don't get any BBs stuck to it, and then grab my wire feed and buzz these out real quick. Well, there it is. Narrowed, welded out. I'm not gonna paint it just yet. I gotta weld some brackets on for brake calipers and some little tabs on to hold the rubber line to the hard brake line. Then I'll paint it. That'll be another video. I think it went all right. If you saw me do anything that there was an easier way to do it or a better way to do it, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Other than that, thanks for watching.